Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, no matter where you are in the world. Big hugs, no matter if you're in, isolation or doing that whole thing. But today we are talking music theory. Now, some people get super icky about it, like, oh, music theory, it's gross, and I don't learn it. And somehow they feel that learning music theory is going to stifle their creativity and all that kind of stuff. I disagree. I think music theory is a super important tool in the quiver, an arrow in the quiver you can use to expand your creativity and do all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to try my best at least to, demystify a lot of the theory stuff. I actually got a question not too long ago from an email subscriber who asked, how do I apply the music theory that I know to playing songs? Now, I thought it was a great question. It was an amazing question because, first of all, it shows an interest in theory, which shows a real drive to improve. And the question actually, it goes beyond like, oh, how do I just learn theory? But how do I apply theory to the stuff that I'm already doing, which is awesome. It's like super, super good. However, the problem with applying theory that you know to songs is, I'd argue, at least at the very start, a little bit backwards. Rather than applying theory to songs you know, what I would suggest instead is to try and extract theory out of the songs that you already know. Now, I'm not sure where exactly all you guys are in the kind of, on the ladder of theory, whether you're like rank number one or whether you like have a PhD in like complex music theory concepts. I know I definitely don't. But that's totally fine. No matter where you are, you can look for things that you do know. So for example, if you know what a chord is, you can look for a chord. If you know what the key is, you can look for that. If you know some more advanced stuff, you can say, okay, where do these chords in the song, where do they come from? What scales are being used? What sounds are being used? Are there notes from outside the key being used somewhere in the song? And if so, where do they come from? Yeah, there's tons and tons of stuff that you can be doing with theory, and it's like really really cool. Now, of course, if you ever get to the point where you're, writing your own songs or licks or riffs or anything, then you can absolutely actually apply theory to your songs. But trying to apply theory to songs rather than extract theory from the songs you already know, that can get a little bit confusing sometimes. Now, we'll be talking about a couple of different theory concepts in this particular live stream. But if you want to go a bit further in depth, head to becomeabassist.com and download my ultimate guide to the modes for bass. It's like a super comprehensive, it's like a couple of lessons in there, PDF. It like lays everything out in super easy to understand terms. I know a bunch of people on the stream have already downloaded it, which is really really cool. And what we're going to talk about today is semi-related to that. It's all about, the most important chunk of music theory that I think gives you the most bang for your buck in terms of, actually getting stuff done on the bass and actually extracting that theory so you can learn from it and do all that kind of stuff. So that most useful chunk, like it's the that the penny kind of dropped for me when I saw this. It was like I could see the code of the matrix. I could like see around corners. I could start predicting what I was going to see in songs and everything like that. It was super super eye opening. And like I said, I'm sure some of you already know this, but I want to show you how a key is built, how they're constructed, how all the keys are the same, and how when you know how keys are built, you can play all the songs you know in any key you like. And there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that happens. Who's into some theory? I know I am. Kenneth asks, "Am I wearing pants?" You'll never know. It's a mystery, one of history's mysteries. I'll never say. Okay, let's go. I'm actually going to get a little bit fancy here. And actually, just before we do that, just making sure that everyone can hear the bass. I can't put my screen down too much, otherwise you'll know if I'm wearing pants or not. So just let me know if you can hear the bass, and if so, we are all good to go. Chuck says, get confused using scales to improvise. We can definitely talk about that for sure. Throwing Spoon says, love learning theory. It's so useful if you want to make music that's actually good. Yeah, this is actually a really good point. There's a lot of, like, the whole music theory is bad kind of crowd. One of their main arguments is, if I learn music theory, then all my songs are just going to sound like everyone else's. But that's a lie. In fact, if you don't learn music theory, the chances of your songs sounding just like everyone else's actually go up because you don't understand how a song's created and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So this is I love what Throwing Spoon here is saying. It's totally a thing. So let's move on. Like I said, let's get a bit fancy. So for those of you who know how a key is made, it's going to be this is going to be a bit of a review for you. So we're actually going to use the key of C for this, C major. And just in case you didn't know, all the notes in the key of C major are just starting on C, no sharps or no flats. So we go C, D, E, oh, pardon me, F, G, A, B, and C. Now you can get into the whole like whole steps and half steps, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's like the formula for creating the major scale. But from this major scale, we can create keys. We can create a universe of sounds, a universe of chords, a universe of scales, and a whole family of interconnected stuff. That's really, really cool. And like I said, I love talking about this stuff because it makes so much sense. So, how do we make an entire key from just a scale? Well, the first step is to make chords from this this scale, right? And the way to do that is starting on every note. We're gonna start on C, for example, right now, and we're gonna go skip one note, so skip this D, and put an E there. So we go C, E, and then from the E right here, we're gonna skip the next note, skip the F, and play a G. So that's gonna go up here. And what do you know? C, E, and oh, I'm moving the whole thing. That's not what I wanted. C, E, and G creates this sound. It's a major chord. Well, that's a bit muddy. Da da da, la la la, kumbaya, all that kind of stuff. Da da da, makes a major chord. Now this makes sense, right? We've got a major scale going down here. It only makes sense that the first chord's going to be a major chord. Now, if we do the same thing with all the other notes within the scale, so we do the same thing starting on D. We play the D, we skip the E, we play the F. F goes there, and then from the F, we skip the G and play the A. That gives us this kind of sound. Where are we at? I'll play it up here. D, F, and A creates a D minor chord. Actually, I'll just write this out. C major, D minor. Yep. Now, I'll just kind of race through these other ones because I don't want to get too bogged down in the details. But just trust me that this is the... I always tell people not to say trust me because it makes me trust you less. But you can check this out, like E, G, B, like E, skip over the F, play the G. G, skip over the A, play the B, creates E minor. F, A, C creates F major. G, B, and D creates G major. A, C, oh, pardon me, let me just do this. Creates A minor. Now B, D, and F creates B. It says it's diminished, but I'm just going to write, oh, can't spell, but I'm just going to say dim for now so it doesn't take up too much space. And then, of course, when we get back to the C, it's going to be the same as the first one, right? C, E, G creates C major. Now, altogether, this is what's known as a major chord scale, yeah? So we have, let's go C major. This is our key, by the way. La, 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 la. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor. Pardon me. Oh, this is up quite high. Up there. C major again at the top. Yeah? So this has created a whole universe of chords within the key of C major. Yeah? Henry asks, can you talk about playing an E over C or an F over D minor, that kind of thing? Yes. Remind me when we get back to like question and answer time, maybe in about 10-15 minutes, and I'll definitely answer that because that's definitely something we can talk about. Okay, so here is our universe of potential chords within this key. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard people talk about, the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, all that stuff. And that's exactly what this is. So if we're in the key of C major, obviously the C major is going to be the 1 chord. Oh, 1 chords, that's not right. The 1 chord. Oh man, I can't type today. Ugh. 1 chord. This D minor is obviously going to be the 2 chord. E minor is the 3 chord. And then 4 chord. Oh, 45 chord, that's not right. It's a lot of chords. G major is obviously the 5. then 6 for the A minor. Oops. Never before have I been so nervous to type in public. Oh, it's terrible. And then, of course, the C major at the bottom is going to do 1 chord again because it's the same as the first one. Now, we've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 chord. Now, this one doesn't really get used that much. Unless you're playing like in I guess jazz music, they use the half diminished, which is like a variation of this particular chord. But this doesn't really get used that much at all. So you're looking at the first 6 chords that get used the vast majority of the time, especially in simpler kinds of music. Like the music you hear on like most radio stations is going to use the 1 chord, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if you know how they sound and how they work within the key, you can like learn songs from just listening to them, and it gets really, really easy to really quickly pick up songs. So, where are we? Is everything clear so far? If you have any questions, just dump them in the live chat. I'll be more than happy to explain things if I'm going a little bit too fast or there's stuff that isn't as clear as it possibly could be. But that's how you get from the major scale down here on the left. Oh, moving stuff around again. Down here on the left, so you get the chords, and then, the 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, all that kind of stuff. Now, by the way, all the keys are the same. So if you change the notes over here, so for example, if you played an F major scale over here on the left, so it went F, instead of, that would be G, this would be A, B flat, C, all the way down to the F major scale, then everything would change, all the notes would change, but over here on the right hand side, those wouldn't change. The F major at the top would still be a 1 chord, this would be a G minor, it would be a 2 chord, so that wouldn't change itself, just the notes and the letters here of the actual chords. But the formula, so like a 1 chord is a minor, 1 chord is a major, 2 chord is a minor, 3 chord is a minor, 4 and 5 are major, 6 is minor, and 7 is a diminished. That's the same for every single major key. Now, things get a little bit... the minor keys are very related. We're not going to get into that today because it would have to take up a bit more time. But this is basically how this works. Now, if you know this, let's actually do this. Okay, we can talk about this as well. How do you make a fully diminished chord resolve? There's a couple ways to do that. We can definitely talk about that. That's another good question. We'll wait until after we've done all this stuff. Okay, GMOC says yes, very clear. Perfect, that's what I love to hear. Awesome. Okay, so how do you extract theory from songs using this particular idea? Okay, let's try this. In the comments, write me, in the live chat rather, write me a song that you know is in a major key, one that like people are likely to know. Because if it's like a super obscure song that no one knows, then it's not going to be as useful because we won't be able to extract the theory from the song. So just give me a song in a major key and we'll extract the theory from those particular songs. It can be any genre. Music theory doesn't care what genre you're playing, whether you're playing like folk music or hard rock, metal, klezmer, jazz, all that stuff. Music theory is the same basically throughout the entire breadth of human music. Okay, Jordan's got one. Don't Stop Believing. This is great. I'm not sure what key this is actually in, but let's pretend that it is in the key of C. All right. Now, if that were the case, how's the song? Okay, so I know from just hearing the song that this is a 1 chord going to 1 chord going to a 5 chord, going to a 6 chord, going to a 4 chord. And so if I'm playing in the key of C, I'll just hide your question so we can see the whole screen. It means we're going 5 chord, 6 chord, and then I think it goes to a 3 chord. Yeah, so 3 going to a 4 chord. So in that one song, just in that one little, one tiny little riff even, we haven't even got to the full song yet. We've got a 1 chord, we've got the C major chord, the 1 chord very home, very strong, do, 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 5 chord, da, 6 chord moving up right there, da, 4 chord right there, pardon me. So we've got a 1, 5, 6, 4 progression. By the way, this is a super common progression. There's tons of songs that use this. If you guys know the Axis of Awesome, I think it's just called Four Chords. It's like this Australian, maybe they're from New Zealand. I can't remember, but it's like this musical comedy troupe, and they just have this massive compilation, I guess, of songs that just use the same four chords all over the place. And like once you hear it, you'll be like, oh wow, all these songs use the same chords, and they get used for a reason because they sound good and they work really well, and it's really easy to put nice melodic, catchy melodies on top of them, which is the most important thing. So if you're looking at Don't Stop Believing, you can be like, okay, this is a 1 chord going to a 5 chord, going to a 6 chord, going to a 4 chord. You can extract those pieces of music theory out of that particular song. And that way, if you ever go to play it in a different key, you can just do this exact same thing, right? You can say, okay, it's a 1 chord going to a 5, going to a 6, going to a 4. I think, I don't quote me on this, but I have, for some reason, a feeling that the actual song is in E, but maybe that's just because I want to play my low E. Now that sounds right. So if that's the case, we probably haven't got time to go through and change all these. But if that was the case, then this would be an E major chord. The 5 chord is going to be down here, but instead of being a G, it's going to be a B chord. C sharp minor, A major chord, 1, 5, 6, 4, yeah? And by the way, it doesn't matter what key you play it in, it's always going to be the exact same formula, because the formula for a major key doesn't change. The formula for the chords in a major key doesn't change, yeah? This is what I mean about like seeing the matrix and being able to see around corners and do all that stuff. It's like a superpower. It's really, really cool. Once you understand how it all works, and the chords within the key and how the key relates to the chords and the notes and the scale and everything. And by the way, if you want to get really into things, you could figure out that every chord within the major key has a scale attached to it, or a mode. And that's we're not going to get super into the modes today. We can if you've got specific questions about them. But for example, over the C major chord, obviously you play the C major scale. Over the 2 chord, the D minor, you can play what's called the D Dorian mode. It's the same notes as C major, just starting on the D. So instead of going C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you go D, E, F, G, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. So just starting on D and just going up or down the scale. So super helpful to be able to see those kind of things. Where have we got? Okay, we've got another one from Brock, Jailhouse Rock. This is another super important one, because this is what's called, this is another one you can like extract more music theory knowledge out of, because Jailhouse Rock follows the specific form. It's obviously a blues, right? So you've probably heard the 12-bar blues, and this one is like a classic, like old school 12-bar blues. I think, I'm not sure if it's actually in A, but a lot of the people I play with play it in A. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, lying all the time. You got the 1 chord in this case. Actually, let's just do it in C just to make things a little bit easy for the start, and then we'll transpose it to the key it's actually in. So we've got the you ain't nothing but a hound dog, C major to 1 chord, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but going to the 4 chord, down back to the 1 chord. Oh, I should have highlighted this one. And then we go up to the you ain't never caught a rabbit, that's the 5 chord, and your 4 chord friend of mine, back to the 1. And every blues is the same. Now, a blues is slightly different because it's not actually based on the pure major scale, because if you look at the actual chords, it's not like just a straight major chord. It's actually what's called a dominant chord. So instead of you get this sound, you have this kind of sound. Rather than the actual major scale. So this one, even more so, you can extract more theory knowledge out of. Pardon me. Should have drank some more water before I got here. But that's another great example. Now let's see. Yeah, this is a really good point. Jordan says, it helps a ton to know all of this when performing with others. I've been on many gigs where someone yells out, we're playing a 1-4-5 in G or something along those lines. Absolutely, this happens all the time. And it's super helpful if you're ever playing at like a jam session, or playing, this happens a lot, I play in like corporate bands and stuff where, we don't necessarily have tons of time to rehearse. a lot of times it's literally zero rehearsal. Everyone just has a shared repertoire, and it kind of get thrown in the deep end. But with competent musicians, it's fine. I actually there was a I'll play I played a New Year's gig like going from last year into this year at a place in New South Wales, like a couple of hours drive south of here, and I'd played with the guys before. I knew all of them pretty well. I didn't know the drummer that well. I'd only played with him like maybe once or twice before, but I played with the guitarist a whole bunch. But he plays some songs that I don't really know. He plays like a lot of '90s, like early '90s stuff that I just don't really know. And he what did he do? He just started playing this song, and I'm like, oh, what is this song? And I didn't like immediately click what it is. Like usually if someone starts playing a song, I'm like, oh, it's like X song or Y song, you know. But this one I was just like, what? What is this? And he's like, oh, do you know what was the song? It's I'll make love to you like you wanted to. The Boys to Men song. I think it's called I'll Make Love to You. I don't know. But he wasn't playing the original version. He was playing like this kind of more upbeat, like guitar funk kind of version. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he just goes, 1 6 2 5 in D. And then he said, there's a flat 7. Just listen out for it. I'm like, okay, sweet, fine, that's awesome. Like that's everything I need to know to play that song, and it comes from knowing this stuff right here. It comes from knowing all this. So if he told me it was I think it was a 1 6 2 5 in D. So that means the one chord's going to be a major, and if it's in the key of D, then I know my one chord's going to be a D major chord. A sixth chord is going to be minor, and if you do the whole like D major scale, you're going to have D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So my sixth chord is actually going to be a B minor. The 2 chord in the key of D is going to be an E minor, and then the 5 chord in D is going to be an A major. So that's all I needed. I was like, okay, sweet. Or however he was playing it, I can't remember. I can't remember the arrangement he played, but it was like super cool. But yeah, and from there, like not just playing the roots of the chords, but like playing little fills, little melodic lines. All that kind of stuff. It comes from knowing the major scales really well, and also knowing how a chord scale is built like this. Super useful. At the end of I think that's another Boys to Men song. I don't know that one either. I'm like, my Boys to Men knowledge is sadly lacking. It's terrible. I'm really sorry that I don't know many Boys to Men songs better. Okay, here's a question. If I'm playing in a certain major key, I can use notes of the minor scale just to make a more interesting bass line. I couldn't see your last videos. Yeah, okay, so the major and the minor scales are very closely related. For example, right now we're in the key of C major, but the minor scale, if you just use the notes of C major but start on the A, you're going to get this. Get A minor. So C major, the one chord in a major key, and the sixth chord, A minor in this case, they share the exact same notes, but this will, if you start on the A, it's going to create A minor. And you can actually create a minor chord scale by starting, for example, starting on the A, and then the sixth chord becomes a 1 chord, the 7th chord becomes a 2 chord, the 1 chord becomes a 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, all that kind of stuff. And that's like totally a thing. I actually have a video about this. I think it's called the Minor Modes Unlocked, and it goes over this kind of idea and like using the minor as the basis of your scale rather than the major, and that's totally a thing, definitely. As far as like, for example, using minor notes in the, like for example, if you're in the key of C major, using minor notes, it's definitely possible. I wouldn't spend too much time doing that. But maybe it's like a little fill or something that just feels a little bit bluesy. That could be really cool. So, for example, if you like, maybe let's do that 1 6 2 5 example. All in C major so far. Maybe a little fill. Minor third, boom, minor 7, boom, 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 boom. All that kind of stuff. That can work really well. It's probably a little bit muddy down there, so maybe something like that. That kind of stuff can work really well. But like I said, if you are like in an actual major key, you can like put a little bit of a minor flavor in there for a little bit, but you probably don't want to stay there for too long. Now, if you're like completely brand new to this and even like not sure about keys and all that kind of stuff, there is a super quick 2-chord hack that you can use to figure out a key really quickly. Now, if you're playing, I'm not going to say every song because there's going to be tons of places where this doesn't work, but there's going to be way more where it does. So if you're playing a song and you come across 2 chords that are a tone apart, so a whole step apart, so like 2 frets apart, and they're both major chords, then you can very easily quickly find out the key. And if you do come across this, if you find a major chord and then another major chord a step above, then most likely this is what you found here. You found the 4 chord and the 5 chord of a particular key. Yeah, so if you came across a song that had an F major and a G major in there, chances are you found a song that's in the key of C major and you found the 4 chord and the 5 chord. Yeah, so if you, and this does, I mean, like I said, it's not going to work everywhere because there's plenty of places where, like, you know, a 1 chord might go to a 2 chord as a major, and then, you know, up to a 4 chord, and then up to a 5 chord. And in that case, you've got like 2 sets of major chords a tone apart, in which case it wouldn't actually work. But most of the time, if you're playing just kind of songs that don't kind of go too far from the key, most of the time you will have found the 4 chord and the 5 chord. So for example, if you do find that, then you can, you know, however you want to find it. If you know the 4 chord is like, for example, if you find the 4 chord is an F, you can just go from wherever you are on that F, you know that the root is just going to be the same fret on the string below. Yeah, or you can think about it like this. If you're on the 5 chord, on the G in this case, the 1 chord is going to be on the same fret, a string above. So from the A string, it's on the D string. Yeah, so, and this works with any key. So let's say we're in, let's do, let's use Don't Stop Believing as an example. I think someone said it was an E flat. So let's use, you know, E flat as an example. That's really high. So we've got a 1 chord, it's going to be an E flat chord, so we've got this kind of thing, 1 chord, going to the 5 chord, going to the 6 chord, going to the 4 chord. So if you just look at the chords, we've got E flat, we've got B flat, C minor, and A flat. Now we've got, actually I might just, to make things a little bit easier, I might just do this. Come on now, there we go. So we've got E flat, we're going to B flat, going to C minor, going to A flat. Now, whereabouts in this place, in this chord progression, do we have two major chords a tone apart? Well, we've got A flat and we've got B flat. Yeah, so we've got A flat here and B flat here. So A flat major chord and then B flat major chord right there. So that means that we're in the key of E flat because we've got two major chords a tone apart. Let's see, what's another example? Okay, what about let's do this in the key of. Actually, I won't tell you the key, otherwise I'll give give the answer away. All right, let's do it like this. Let's go. B flat C, E flat F. This is I guess you say just to make me feel this way, my girl, my girl, my flag. Yeah, so where do we have two major chords here? Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be a minor chord. That may have been a little bit confusing because then these would have been two that would have been a pair of things right there. But in this chord progression, where do we have two major chords that are a tone apart? We have this E flat major chord here, and we have this F chord here. Or maybe feels a bit better there. So we know that's the 4 chord, and we know that's the 5 chord. If we look at E flat on our bass, it's going to be right here, and if we know that's the 4 chord, we know that our actual key is on the string below, or I guess the thicker string, however we want to, in that direction. Whether you call that up or down is up to you. Or if you're at F at the 5 chord, you go in this direction. So this chord progression is in the key of B flat major. It's like right there in the first chord there. So this is like a little 2 chord hack you can use to really quickly find the key of a song. Yeah, Tahoe 829 is all over it. This is a really good point. Music theory applies to all music, not one certain instrument. Absolutely. Not only does it apply to all the instruments, but it applies to all different styles of music as well. I mean, once you get into more, I guess, adventurous music with like quarter tones and all that kind of stuff, it gets a little bit shaky. But even then, music theory is. This is the other thing about music theory that a lot of people don't understand. They think that music theory is a means to write music. It's not really like that. Music theory is a way of explaining the music that already exists. Yeah. So the whole point of music theory isn't necessarily to write beautiful stuff. It's there to help explain the beautiful stuff that's already happened. Yeah. So most people, when they think about music theory, they think about like a boring, dull classroom, and like there's some like professor at the whiteboard saying, okay, in the Ionian mode, it's derived from the Greek. Like it can be like really dull, but to me, it's super exciting. I love talking about this stuff because it explains all the sounds that I love. It explains, the harmony. It explains melody. It explains chord progressions and keys and like where did these chords come from and all this kind of stuff. It's super exciting. So if you are one of the people who is not a fan of music theory, I would seriously recommend even diving into it just a little bit. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, Luke was asking whether this can work on bass and electric or even acoustic. Yeah, totally. It works no matter what kind of instrument you're playing, totally. Now, there were a couple of questions I wanted to come back to. Jordan was saying, walking bass lines in jazz can use notes outside the scale as passing tones. Exactly. And a passing tone, someone played a passing tone, but it wasn't called a passing tone. They're like, oh, this sounds good. And then music theorists came along later and it's like, oh, well, this is a note to get to that one. It kind of passes through. So let's call that a passing tone. It's not like the original walking bass players who are like, oh, I'm going to put a passing tone here. They're like, this sounds good to me. I'm going to put it in there. Who gives a So this is what I'm talking about. Like the theory comes after the music. Bass says you're epic. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now, where were we at? There was some. I can't remember who. There was one question about. Okay, right. There was one question about playing over like slash chords and things like that. So I'll bring this back up. Oh, there we go. So someone was asking about playing, for example, a C major chord. Oh, where am I? C major chord, but with an E in the bass. So instead of playing like just a regular C major chord, we'd get C over E. Yeah, so this kind of thing happens a fair bit. So in this regular C major chord, you just have C, E, and G. But the important thing in a regular C major chord is that the C is on the bottom. So you as a bass player, you're playing a C the whole time, or playing whatever it is. But the C is the most prominent low sound. In a chord like this, where it's a C chord over an E note, it kind of gets moved around a little bit. So instead of the C being on the bottom, we get the E being on the bottom. It sounds more like this. E. Instead of the root being down the bottom. Duh, I can't sing that low. Duh, instead of that note being on the bottom, which is the actual root of the chord, duh, we get this. And you can also have This is, by the way, this is called an inversion. So if you just have a regular chords with like a C, E, and G, so the roots on the bottom, it's just called root position, which means something different in Australia. The first inversion is where you have the third on the bottom, so it sounds like this. And you can also have second inversion, which puts the other note, the one last note, on the bottom. So we'll put that there and put that there. So that sounds like this. Yeah, so this would be, actually, this is a little bit confusing. C is going to be C, E, G. E, G, C is going to be, oh, whoops, put that there. It's going to be C over E. And then this one down here is going to be C over G. Now notice the chord doesn't change. It's always a C chord. C chord, C over E, C over G. That's because the notes aren't changing. The actual notes that are getting used don't change one bit. Like it's still the same note. C, E, and G, C, E, and G, C, E, and G. They're just in a different order. So you don't need to worry about changing the actual notes. All you need to worry about when you see chords like this is, okay, if it's C over an E chord, then I need to be playing an E. Or if it's a C over a G chord, then I need to, as a bass player, be playing that G right there. I wish I could find that question up here. Oh, I've lost it. I've lost it. There was another question as well. So, if, oh, Lucas asked him, "Where's the beard?" I was starting to look a bit too much of a sea dog. Music node, definitely. Yeah, this is another thing. Bach used a ton of passing tones. Bach used he used a modal interchange. He used pivot theory and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, what we were talking about before with all this stuff on screen. It's called an inversion for sure. Okay. So this is another question. When you get to the E over C, why does it work so well? How does the seventh fit in there? Okay, so as far as why does it work so well, I don't know. It just does, especially in specific contexts. So, for example, one super common way that this inversions get used is, for example, to go from one chord to another. So going from C chord, so playing this, so playing this, so playing this, and then going to, in this case, it'd be an F chord. So we got C chord, C over E, going to an F chord. Part of the reason it sounds so good is something called voice leading. So, and voice leading is kind of like how the ear wants things to resolve. So we've got this kind of sound. In this chord here, we've got a bunch of notes that just sound really good when they move around. So in this case, we've got, I'm not sure if you can see this, we've got an E chord, the E, C, and G. This G really wants to resolve up to here, and this E wants to resolve up to here. And this C over here, it can stay the same. I'm gonna play it down there, but it's gonna be the same note. So have a listen. So the da da sounds really good, and the da da right there, da 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 da, and then the C stays the same. Da da da. Yeah, it just sounds really good, works really well. The other super common one that gets used is if you're in the key. Let's just keep everything in the key of C for now to make things interesting. Well, make things easy rather. If you're in the key of C, a super common chord progression. In fact, it's the one that we use in Don't Stop Believing. 1 5 6 4. One chord going to a 5 chord. Instead of going to a 5 chord down there, we can play the 5 chord as a first inversion. So in this case, we're playing a C chord, going to a G chord. But if we play the G chord in first inversion, then we have, instead of having this kind of thing that goes up, that we had going from the E to the C, E over C, sorry, C over E, man, to the F chord, we have this really nice falling motion when we get this. So we get C going to B, yeah, da, da, that's our lower voice. Our upper voice is going da, da, and this one stays the same. Da, 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 da. So we've got da, da, we've got da, da, and then we've got the G that stays the same. So sorry, G, G. So maybe part of the reason it sounds so good is because there's that shared common tone in between both the chord you're on and the chord that you go to. So there's that kind of glue that sticks it all together, and that's true for the first example that we did. In that case, it was the C that stayed the same. Da, da. But in the second one, it was the G. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 all that kind of stuff. How does the seventh fit in? You can also do, you know, you can have this kind of stuff where you've got a seventh chord, so it turns this into a C major 7. I'll run out of space here. And then I guess you could, you know, do this whole kind of thing where you've got, so I guess it'd be like this. And then that would make like a C major 7 over E. That's a thing. And then you can also have a third inversion where you have the B on the bottom, but that's not super common. Doesn't sound particularly nice. I'll see if I can do it. Oh, how could I do this on a bass? Okay. Do this. Okay. This is what it'd sound like. Here's our C chord. C, E, G, and then the B, but the B's down here. It's not really the prettiest sound, but that would be the third inversion. So C major 7 over B. It does happen every once in a while, but you don't see it super, super often. Tahoe829 says it helps know chord tones. Totally. Definitely super helpful for knowing chord tones. Now, okay, Lucas says it's a total noob and need to learn starter bass chords and beginner theory. I would definitely recommend not just, you know, advanced people, but all bass players are super helpful to play chords, because it's, you know, it's very different for like a pianist or a guitarist, because they're like playing these chords and they can kind of grasp their mind around how they work. It's not as common on bass, but it's definitely very useful. So I'd recommend going to becomeabassist.com/basschordpro. I've got like a 10-part series all about bass chords. It's totally free. Sign up there. Look at all the bass chords, like all the kind of voicings I've been using today, like these ones. Oh, pardon me. That's like your major chord. Change the third to that's your minor chord, and then you can get into all things like the, you know, major 7 voicings, dominant 7, minor 7, and like played on other strings as well. So like C major 7 up here, dominant 7, minor 7, do like all that kind of stuff. That was the other question. Someone asked about how do you make diminished chords resolve so well. This is a really good question. I'm going to have to answer this. Let's see. Lavelle says, I think Cyndi Lauper's True Colors uses some versions. Totally. I see your true colors. True colors shining through. I think it's like, I think it's the one we're talking about where it goes from the 1 chord in first inversion to a 4 chord. Okay, so let's talk more about the diminished thing, because that's super interesting. And if you haven't figured this out yet, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to music theory stuff. Okay, so diminished chords and how they work. So just in case you don't know, a diminished chord or a dim 7 chord is you can create them by using all minor thirds. Yeah, so if you just pick any random note, so for example, if we picked C and create C diminished 7, you can just go up a minor third, another one, and if you get to another one, that's the whole diminished chord. And diminished chords are really interesting because they're symmetrical chords. They, like, if you start on one note, and that's like in the root, then it's that diminished chord. If you start on the third, that's also a diminished chord, but just a different root. So like C, E flat, F sharp, and A diminished, they all share the same notes. they're essentially the same chord, which means that there's only 3 diminished chords. There's the one that starts on C, there's one that starts on C sharp, and like all the family of notes within that, one that starts on D plus all the family of notes within that, and then once you get back to E flat, it's the same notes as in what's in a C diminished 7 chord. Now, as far as how they resolve, that's a really good question, because most of the time, diminished 7 chords can be replaced for dominant 7 chords. So if I have, let's stay in the key of C minor. So if I have a G7 chord, which is usually the 5 chord in, a major or a minor key. So if I have this kind of G7 sound, most of the time that G7 sound is going to resolve to either a C major or a C minor. And this goes back to what we talked about before with voice leading. So all the kind of voices inside that want to resolve in some way. So this one wants to go to there, and then this one wants to go to there, and this one wants to stay there. Da 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 da. Sounds good on both. But this one really wants to go to there and resolve, and this one really wants to go to there. It could also go to there. So that works as well. But once you get into altering this G7 chord, that usually involves flattening the ninth. So if you have a G7 chord, you have G, B, D, and then F. If you have what's called a G7 flat 9, that's going to be the same exact notes, G, B, D, and F, but you're also going to have an A flat on the top there. Oh, I might have to make this a tiny bit smaller. Yeah, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay, cool. So, G7 flat 9. So, if you had like a regular... Actually, there's one step in between there. I should probably let you know what's actually going on. That's going to be G, B, D, F. Oh, whoops. Now, if we have a G9, so a G9, it's just going to add an extra note on top. So if we have G, B, D, F, and A, it's like this kind of sound. And the 9 pretty much always wants to go to there. So so the 9 in this case, this A, it's going to resolve down to the G over the C chord. But if you alter this and make this an A flat, it's going to create a whole bunch of extra tension, and it's going to create a whole bunch of extra resolution as well. If we get this kind of thing, we get this sound, and it resolves to there. We've got a half step resolution now versus a whole step resolution, which is in general a little bit stronger. Flat 9 going to the 5th. But if you check this out, have a look at the last 4 notes of this G7 flat 9 chord. We've got a B, D, F, and A flat. There's a minor third in between the B and the D. There's a minor third in between the B, D, and F. There's a minor third in between the F and the A flat. This is essentially a B diminished chord. So you can think of the G7 flat 9 is pretty much equal to B diminished 7. Yeah, so anytime you see G7 flat 9, you can think B diminished 7. And B diminished 7 in this case is going to resolve to some kind of C, yeah? Could be a C major, could be a C minor, but if this is a 5 chord in any key, whether it's a major or minor, this is going to usually resolve down to some kind of C. So possibly major, possibly minor. Ooh, let's leave it a little bit in there. Yeah. So so if you have all the notes there, and have a look at where each of them resolve. So if we've got a B and we're resolving to some kind of C, what's the closest note to B what's the closest note in the next chord? So what's the closest note in C major to B? It's going to be a C, right? So in that case, we've got the B diminished, resolving to the C, whether it's a C major or a C minor, it's the same thing. B diminished, B going to C minor, B diminished going to C major. Yeah? The D, where is the D resolving? The D can go either way. Like most things in life, the D can go either up to the third of the C major or C minor, so it can go go up to the E in the C major, or it can go from the D up to the E flat in the C minor. Yeah, or it could possibly also go down to the C. Da, 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 da. Yeah. Now the F, it also can go either way. It can go up to the G in either the C major or C minor, or it can go down to the E or down to the E flat, depending on whether it's a major or minor. So I'm gonna have to change my voicing here. So yeah, here we go. Da, da, goes down there in the major, or da, da, or da, up there. That works as well on the major or minor because both are the same. Now the A flat, where I can play it down here. Da, 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 that'll pretty much only resolve down to there, whether it's a major or minor. Da, da. So if you look at how each of the notes resolve within that diminished chord, it becomes like very clear, like they each want to resolve a specific way. So the G is obviously going to stay the same, B up to C, D either down to C or up to the third, F usually resolving to the third, possibly up to the fifth, and the A flat almost always going down to the fifth. Now this is a bit more advanced than what we're talking about in the at the very start. But this is like still very, very good, good to know all that stuff. Now let's see, where are we at? Yeah, there's also a bunch of what we're talking about before in the with the diminished chords. It's just made up of a bunch of tritones as well. That's totally true. Darren's coming from Brisbane. Awesome, Brisbane represent all the way. Now let's see, we've got some more. Just looking for more questions. Okay, I think we're near. It's glazing over. Yeah, like I said, this one's getting a bit more advanced than we originally anticipated. But yeah, it's good to know as well. Now, yeah, Ben's saying nice. Try and keep this all ahead from uni. Yeah, totally. It's and in case you guys don't know, Ben's actually a drummer. So he would have learnt all this stuff in uni as well. But it's a lot easier to kind of retain it all if you're playing an instrument that plays notes as well. It's not to say it's impossible if you only play a rhythmic instrument like drums, but actually I'm not sure. Ben, do you play other instruments as well, like piano or keyboards or guitar, or do you play a bit of bass? Is that why you're here, up in your bass skills? If that's the case, then it's like I will say this: all of the very best drummers I've ever played with all played some kind of melodic instrument, whether even if it was like percussion or something, but like Jack DeJohnette. Who I'm not sure you guys might know. He's like one of like the legendary jazz drummers of all time, like top level tier, and he plays a bunch of piano. He like is a wicked piano player. If you listen to like old jazz recordings, you hear like Philly Joe, like another one of like the classic blue note kind of session dudes. He could hear harmony and react to the harmony within his drumming. It's like super impressive. But yeah. Let's. I've gone way more than I had expected. Like I said, I'm a nerd for this stuff. I totally, I totally get carried away with all this stuff. But thanks for what's the word? Appeasing my music theory nerd stuff. But let's call it a day right there because I'm sure some eyes are glazing over a little bit. Thanks again for hanging out. Thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate it. If you have more theory questions, dump them in the comments afterwards. I'll try and answer some of them as we go along. And make sure if you do want to get deeper into this stuff, or just to have it in like a hard copy form, like a PDF, head to becomeabassist.com, download the Ultimate Guide to the Modes. It's like we're not going to get super into the into the weeds like we did with the diminished chords and all that kind of stuff, because that's a little bit too much. But if you do want to know how the keys are constructed and how you can start seeing the code in the matrix and seeing around corners, doing all that kind of stuff, then absolutely download that guide. It'll help out a whole bunch. So once again, thanks for sticking around. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next stream. Have a good one. Catch you later.